I mean, you've been in B2B marketing and growth for 10 years now. Has this always been like this? Have the best, biggest, most successful companies always prioritized brand? Is there something new about this?
So when everyone knows this and everyone's playing the same game, guess what you need to do? You need to figure out how to stand out. How do you stand out? Creative, storytelling, brand, emotion, subconscious. And those things are really, really hard.
How should B2B companies measure brand today?
Lots of B2B CMOs are going to come after me and say, no, we got product marketing and enablement and customer marketing. I'm like, if all of that stopped tomorrow, nothing about your pipeline to close one is going to change. So you have to find the right leading indicators. And if you can't have that conversation with your executives and you're getting forced in a corner and you just have closed one revenue, you already lost. You need to get out of there and go work for a different company.
All right, before we dive in, you're listening to the Executive Brand Podcast with me, your host, Thormeier. Each week, I sit down with top B2B CEOs, executive, and founders to break down their playbooks. If you've not yet, it would really help if you subscribe or follow the show because it helps us get on better guests and create better content for you guys. All right, let's dive in. All right, I'm here with Pranav Piyush. He is the co-founder and CEO at Paramark. Paramark is a marketing measurement platform that unifies incrementally testing, marketing mix modeling, and growth advisory in one place. Started the company in 2023. Now there are about 35 people according to LinkedIn. You can correct me there in a second. Prior to starting Paramark, he was VP marketing at Bill, head of growth at pilot.com, and head of growth at Magento during the time that Adobe acquired them in 2018. The reason why I wanted to have you on is, number one, you're deep into marketing measurement and attribution, which is still one of the biggest challenges for most marketers. And then two, you're doing actually a really great job with your founder brand. I spent a bunch of time reading your LinkedIn post today in prep for this episode, and I learned quite a few things. So thank you for joining the show, and let me know if you want to correct anything in that intro.
No, thanks for having me. I've been seeing your clips and your posts over the last several months on my LinkedIn. So you're also doing a great job getting out there. And very excited about the conversation we're about to have. My kids might show up in the background, and that's just going to be part of, they have a day off from school. So yeah, the only correction is we're 25 people, but you know how LinkedIn 25. Is. Like advisors and investors are going to show up in that list. But yeah, we're a small startup and seed stage, growing fast, and yeah, marketing measurement is the thing that we do.
I love it. So in one of your recent posts, you talked about how all the fastest growing AI startups are growing even faster by investing into brand marketing, social influencer video, connected TV, podcasts. I mean, you've been in B2B marketing and growth for 10 years now. Has this always been like this? Have the best, biggest, most successful companies always prioritized brand? Is there something new about this going on in 2026 with the era of AI? How are you seeing things change here, and what fundamental truths still hold?
I mean, you just go back and think about, I personally don't love the B2B versus B2C and like that whole sort of, yes, we have lots of B2B customers, but we also have lots of B2C customers. What I would say is you go back in time, look at the most iconic companies that have been built, and you'd be surprised when you go and read their story how much brand had a role to play in it, right? You think about even Microsoft, and everyone remembers this video of Steve on stage going, developers, 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 right? What do you think that is, right? You see the 1984 ad from Apple. What is that, right? Like, you think about all of these companies, they figure out a universal truth, and then they figure out a way to tell that story through every medium possible, and that is good marketing. What happened in the last couple of decades is it's most tech companies just lost the plot and thought that it is all about, high frequency trading in the, Meta and Google accounts, and forgot that you have to complement that with the storytelling and the creative and the art of marketing, which has to be a very nice complement to all the arbitrage that you can find on Google and Meta and LinkedIn.
Now, you're in the measurement business. Is it fair to say that measurement is part of the culprit here? Because many of the digital channels, I mean, before Google Ads, you weren't really able to track many things down to a minute level. And then you were for certain things, like your Google Ads, like maybe your Meta Ads. And that gave people the illusion of, oh, we can just see a direct line of what we do to revenue. So therefore, let's just only do those things where we can draw that line, which led to the deterioration of the brand muscle.
Yes and no. I think there's a few things that get conflated here. There's a very good book by Claude Hopkins. I don't know if you've heard that name, called Scientific Advertising. Okay, this book is called Scientific Advertising. I think it was written in the 30s, maybe 40s, wow. 50s. I don't know. So there were these people who were in that era talking about scientific ways of measuring the effect of brand marketing. They did geo-tests. They ran real experiments. None of this is new. And at the same time, they did big, bold marketing campaigns. It wasn't about just optimizing for the last click. There was no click back then. So this idea that somehow measurement is the culprit is not the right way of thinking about it. Here's the right sort of way of thinking about why this problem happened. Late 90s, early 2000s, when digital got invented, right? That's the first time you could go on the internet and put an ad and suddenly have hundreds of eyeballs within a matter of hours. And that concept didn't exist, right? So everything became easier. The act of marketing, or one type of marketing, one type of distribution, became a lot easier. When that distribution became easier, the whole world thought, oh, like, we don't have to worry about creative. We just got to go get eyeballs on the internet. You see my point? Because it was so easy. The barrier to entry went down. So every one of us thought that we could be geniuses online by launching these digital ads. And we know exactly who clicked on it. And suddenly we're going to be, very, very wealthy from figuring out this online channel. Some of it was true. A lot of people did become wealthy as a result of that channel. But you conflated a couple of things, which is a lot of that initial growth was coming because the channel itself was growing. Google and Meta went from 0 to billions of users. So just by the fact that you were on the channel helped you grow, regardless of whether your creative and your ads or your offers were good or not. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you didn't have to work that hard for a long period of time because the natural growth rate of that channel was amazing. So if you figured out how to work that channel, you were fantastic. And then now what's happened in the last 5 years is all of those channels have saturated. So now your CPMs, your CPCs keep getting inflated every year. You're investing the same number of dollars and your business is not growing at the same rate as Meta and Google are growing. So what's going on? Well, now you have real competition. It's no longer a secret to do online advertising, right? Or social advertising. Everyone knows this. So when everyone knows this and everyone's playing the same game, guess what you need to do? You need to figure out how to stand out. How do you stand out? Creative, storytelling, brand, emotion, subconscious. And those things are really, really hard. So the culprit was how easy these platforms made it for everyone to flood the marketplace with suboptimal stuff and made it really easy to track. But I don't think measurement is the culprit here.
Complacency is always the enemy. How should B2B companies measure brand today? And you can give your caveats on maybe company size. If I'm sure there's some differences between a 5 million ARR and a Fortune 500, but
we'll keep it very simple. The question itself is a little bit problematic. What do we mean by measure brand? Right? What do you think? What do you refer to when you say the word brand in there?
I guess what I mean is, how do you figure out the impact of certain channels, approaches, activities
Okay.
that are not as easily connected to, oh, I sent this outbound email and I booked the call and I closed the revenue?
Perfect. So that's a good starting point, is let's get really precise about defining. And the way you define brand, and a lot of people define brand, is all the things that are harder to measure get put in the brand bucket. So it's a self-fulfilling vicious cycle where your measurement framework is defining what is brand versus performance, rather than something inherent about that channel or activity. So that's problem number one. I'll go back to the book Scientific Advertising and Claude Hopkins. There was no measurement back then. So let's start from first principles. This guy, there's a story in the book about him selling different types of broomsticks, okay? Like broomsticks. And his job was to create demand for this particular company that was producing these broomsticks. And what did he do? He focused on, okay, how are my broomsticks going to be different from these other companies who are selling broomsticks? It's a very highly commoditized product. And he focused on the quality and the craftsmanship of the wood that was used to make the broomsticks. That was the whole thing for him. It's like, you would feel proud to display this broomstick. It's like stylistic, it's artistic, it's a statement that you're making. And what did he do? He sent out a whole bunch of mailers to the entire city advertising this, artistic way of thinking about broomsticks. Now, do you call that brand marketing? Maybe not, right? Because it's actually very direct response. Right. And those people would then go to the stores and take that little coupon and say, hey, I want this particular broomstick or what have you. Now, you can argue that that is brand marketing. You can argue that that is performance marketing, because actually it was very measurable for him, because he could say, I'm only going to send it to these 3 parts of the city. And all the stores in that part of the city, I'm going to measure the success of my direct mail campaign, right? That's a very performance-oriented way of looking at marketing. But the real sort of alpha there is the creative and the brochures, and how do you get somebody to open that brochure and all that fun stuff, right? So let's come back to now. How do you measure the impact of channels that do not induce a direct click or a touch or a tap, right? We're talking about video, we're talking about social, we're talking about CTV, we're talking about influencer, we're talking about, organic social. Exact same thing. First, get really clear about what is the metric that you expect these things to drive. Are you expecting them to drive a form fill on your website? Are you expecting them to drive queries on Google or ChatGPT for your brand? Are you expecting it to drive, hand raisers and demo bookings right off the bat? What is the goal of the thing that you're trying to do? And, let's be honest, in B2B, you're going to get gold on either pipeline or closed won. And you have to be smart enough and influential enough in your company to be able to go to your CFO and CEO and say, hey, those are not the only 2 metrics that you should be looking at. You should be looking at traffic or search query volume rather than just pipeline and closed won. So you have to find the right leading indicators. And if you can't have that conversation with your executives and you're getting forced in a corner and you just have closed won revenue, you already lost. You need to get out of there and go work for a different company.
By the way, I looked up the book. It was published in 1923, so incredible. I mean, it's over 100 years old now.
And it's called Scientific Advertising. Can you believe that, right?
Yeah.
We still don't do scientific advertising today. And we're like, oh my God, like measurement is the culprit. No, people were doing this a century ago.
Now, I think you never define how you define brand.
Ooh.
How do you define brand? Like what is brand? What is brand marketing?
I really don't love the word brand marketing and performance marketing. I think these are, if I could choose, I would never have that distinction. I have seen what people call brand campaigns drive immediate results. And I have seen brand campaigns that won tons of awards and had lots of fame and recognition do zilch for the business. And so there is no consistent definition of brand marketing. I personally don't use that term, just like I personally don't think that attribution means attribution in the modern SaaS. And but those are the terms that the industry has co-opted, and so we have to live with them. So I think what most people say is what you said, right? Which is things that are harder to measure are brand marketing. But I hate that definition, and I don't think you need a different definition for brand marketing versus performance marketing. Now, I can say that there are certain types of marketing that, what's the right way of framing this? You know, for a while there's this conversation about short-term and long-term. And there's marketing that's focused on the short term, there's marketing that's focused on the long term. Even that framing is wrong, because that implies that when you do that, long-term marketing, that it doesn't have short-term effect. But that's just not how marketing works. If you are going to have effect, it is actually going to be more prominent in the short term than the long term. It's like this decay curve that happens over time. And so you have some impact in the short term, and then it decays over time and has a long tail. And so you might have a very, very long tail. But generally, I'm not going to give a cop-out answer. I just don't love the brand marketing term. I love brand. Like, you should have brands. That's how we understand the world, right? Everything is a symbol and a way for you to associate a mark to a thing. That's extremely valuable if you're going to build a large business. You can't build a large business if you don't have a brand. But brand marketing, I think, is a false concept in its entirety.
So whether or not we agree that the term brand marketing makes sense or should be used, a lot of marketers still obviously need to prove to their CEO, to their CFO, to their board that whatever they're doing, whatever money they're spending in campaigns they're running has an impact. There's just the part of, okay, I'm spending this amount of money and I'm just trying to understand which one has a relatively bigger effect so that I can allocate more budget towards these things and less towards these things. That's more like to inform strategy. And then there's also the hey, I need to actually prove my worth and show people that the money that they pay me, whether, my salary or my team, is actually doing anything just so I can justify my role and my job and not get laid off. I think, selfishly, it always makes sense to run through an example, right? We do LinkedIn content for founders and executives at companies that are doing anywhere between 5 to 50 million. How would you advise me on what should I look at or tell our customers to look at to be able to see or tell, hey, these LinkedIn posts that are going out through your, founder is doing long-term stuff, or however you think about it?
Okay. At the earliest stages, when you are, 5 to 50 is still fairly early in my opinion. My advice to people, and we're at the low end of that mark, right? So we are ourselves kind of at that stage. I don't even question this sort of whole idea of LinkedIn. If you're B2B, what else are you going to do? This is your table stakes. This is the bare minimum that you should be doing. And so my view is, if you are having to justify or defend the investment into LinkedIn, both organic and paid, you're doing something wrong. Like, the CEO doesn't get it, or the board doesn't get it. They don't understand how B2B businesses are built. So this is a fundamental issue. It's like if I'm a D2C company and if I have to tell people that I need to go advertise on Instagram and I have to defend that decision, that's right. Like, you don't even know how business works. Forget about marketing. So there's a fundamental sort of issue there, that this is not about defending or justifying your investments in LinkedIn, for you specifically. Now, the question is, how much do you invest? And that is a question that does deserve some scrutiny. And the way that you start is sizing your market. So number one, have you created a bottoms up or tops down way of looking at how many companies are in your target account list, right? So is that 1,000 companies? Is that 10,000 companies? Is that 20,000 companies based on your definition of who's an ideal customer? And, I would actually encourage you to, for every single LinkedIn post and your general sort of LinkedIn strategy, have a view of what percentage of your target audience are you reaching. And that's very hard because LinkedIn doesn't give you that data. Mm-hmm. So you have to have some proxies of doing it, right? And the proxies are, for us, it would be, hey, our VPs of marketing, what percentage of all views in a certain post went to a marketing title? And that is something that you can actually get from LinkedIn, right? So those are the kinds of things that you would look at. Define the size of the market, and then every post, are you getting more or less of your sort of target audience on that post? Now, when you do paid, it becomes even easier because you start to get a little bit more data. So now you can say out of the 100,000 people that you could possibly reach on LinkedIn, because when you load up your list into LinkedIn Ads Manager, it'll tell you this is your total, size. And then you look at what is your reach and frequency on that channel. And if your reach and frequency is, pretty decent, fantastic, but don't over-invest if you've tapped out reach and frequency. If you're already reaching 60%, 70% of the people and you're reaching them 5 to 10 times a month, is there benefit to trying and reaching them 20 times a month, or is that overdoing it, right? And you can test all of these things by increasing your spend and trying to get more and more sort of frequency. But at certain points, you will see that as you invest more, you don't get more out of LinkedIn. So that's the signal to you to diversify outside of LinkedIn, to try and go to other channels where you have, either the 20 or 30% of the population that you're not reaching, or it's the same audience, but you're reaching them in a different context. Maybe when they're out there for entertainment, or when they're just consuming news, or what have you, right? So at the end of the day, it's your target audience, it's how many are you reaching, it's how frequently are you reaching them. This is the core of advertising, and that's what you have to look at.
And then let's say you're on the opposite end. So you're almost painting the scenario, hey, we're spending so much that now our frequencies, we're reaching everyone in our target audience 8 times, 10 times, 20 times. That's not, we're getting diminishing returns. So let's put some of that budget elsewhere. If you're only reaching, let's say 1 or 2 or 10% of your target market, do you then look, do you then look at CPM? So like if we're doing organic, hey, we're spending this much on an agency and this much on whatever total spend on getting this LinkedIn organic content, and we're only reaching 1% of our target market. But with ads, we can actually reach 10% of our target market for the same amount if we would put it into ad spend. Is that how you then would?
100%, right? Like we were organic social, organic LinkedIn for 2 years in our 3-year journey, probably two and a half years. We started experimenting with ads July of last year, and we've slowly been sort of ramping up over the last 6 months in terms of, it takes a different type of skill set, it takes different type of content, takes different type of, a mindset. And we looked at how are we doing compared to our TAM on LinkedIn. And the reason we started that is like there's a limit to organic social. There's no, social channel that is going to give you unlimited reach and frequency in your target audience. That's just not how the algos work. That's not how the incentives work. So at some point, you have to go into advertising. And we made that decision last year, and we're seeing some good benefits in terms of increased pipeline and increased sort of engagement, even on our organic channels. So we just continue to deploy more. And you can't even get precise measurements of how much of your TAM are you covering through organic social. So it's very much a proxy, and you have to use titles and individual posts and what have you. The one other thing I would say is, if you're doing a good job on LinkedIn, people will tell you. You will get unsolicited DMs back saying, hey, love your content. If you're not getting that, you have a problem, right? So there are other qualitative signals that you can start to look at where that should give you confidence of continue to do more, in fact, try to increase it so you're getting more inbound and so on and so forth. So there are many qualitative things that you can do at the early stages to make the decision of when it's the right time to scale up.
Now, I mean, you guys do, or Paramark enables companies to do incrementality testing and marketing mix modeling. If there's such great methods, why are so many companies either still saying they can't measure brand at all or using stuff like last touch? Why is not everyone just on incrementality plus MMM?
Very good question, and it's fundamental to our thesis for building this business. Number one, by definition, SMBs and startups are not going to adopt this stuff. That's by definition. So we work with businesses that are spending at least 5 million or more on marketing. If you're spending less than 5 million on marketing, there are a few things that are going against you per year. Yeah. There are a few things that are going against you. One, it is highly likely, and these are all probabilistic answers, right? There's always exceptions to the rule. It is highly likely that your head of marketing or head of paid media or head of performance marketing, whatever your title is, this is their first time doing this job, right? They're working at an earlier stage company. Second, your CEO, startup founder, startup CEO, they're probably, more likely than not, they come from an engineering, product, or sales background. They have no understanding of marketing, or very little, right? They obviously instinctively have skills, but not the formalized sort of way of thinking about these things. There's always like imposter syndrome whenever they're doing marketing. And the third is your sample sizes and your volumes are very small and very low. When you combine all these three things, right? So your marketing team is inexperienced, your founder probably does not have much background and experience in marketing, and your sample sizes are small, it presents lots of barriers into adopting anything new. You just want to be told, hey, spend money on this channel, it's going to have this predictable outcome. And the reality is marketing just doesn't work like that. Marketing is actually more entrepreneurial and more engineering-like than people give it credit. They just don't know. So there's a lot of like unsophisticated teams and unsophisticated buyers at that SMB layer. And guess what? They are the most voluminous, right? There's hundreds of thousands of these SMBs and Series A and seed stage startups. So the echo chamber of LinkedIn, of Twitter, of any other channel, you just keep circulating in this first touch, last touch, self-reported attribution nonsense, in my opinion, rather than being able to pull yourself out of your echo chamber and go and talk about incrementality and marketing mix modeling and so on and so forth. Now, it's not a problem for us because our focus is that mid-market and enterprise, so we can ignore the echo chamber. And even if I'm not getting 20,000, 50,000 impressions on every post, it doesn't matter to me because we have a very specific TAM. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not a problem. Now, do I wish somebody solved this problem for SMBs and startups? Heck yes. Someday we will, but we're not there yet. We don't need to solve that problem. And I would encourage every marketer in the startup land to go educate themselves on this stuff, because if you are going to build a lasting career, you have no choice. This is the stuff that's going to help you grow.
Now, for the companies that you work with, 5 million plus in marketing spend, which I guess is around 50 million plus yearly revenue. I mean, one of the things that I read all the time on LinkedIn, especially right now, that obviously CMOs have the shortest tenure in B2B. There's a ton of pressure. I saw a study by Winter just yesterday, I think, that budgets are being cut while there's higher expectations from CMOs to drive pipeline and drive outcome. For that company size, and you're a CMO like that, and you're talking to them, and they need to do more with less, what advice do you have, both in terms of tactically, strategically, what to implement, as well as You mentioned previously you need to have certain conversations with your CEO and CFO. What are those conversations? What would you advise them on how to navigate
Yeah.
those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you're a new CMO, right, you have basically about 3 to 4 quarters to demonstrate that you can move the numbers. If you don't achieve that in the first 3 to 4 quarters, they'll probably start a search for the next CMO, even though they don't tell you that. And another 2 to 3 quarters after that, and you're out of a job. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, and be very self-aware that you need to put wins on the board. And I don't mean activities or output, I mean outcomes. And so that's number one. Have the self-awareness and a clear-eyed view that if you're not hitting your numbers, that there's going to be a problem. You maybe have a grace period of like 6 months. The second thing is having the right conversation with the CEO and the CFO, like we talked about. And that conversation is, hey, there's going to be 3 goals, and I'll make it very simple for B2B. There's some amount of traffic or search query volume. And I mean these very broadly, right? Search query includes Google, but also like, AI citations and what have you. The total number of people putting your brand name into a box and searching for you. It doesn't matter where they search for you, right? That number needs to go up and to the right. That is number one. Second, the number of people who raise their hands and say, I want a demo. Or alternatively, if you have a self-serve PLG type of product, the number of people who are raising their hand and saying, I'm putting my credit card down for a trial, right? Whatever it might be. That number needs to go up and to the right. Those are the 2 measures of success that you need to align on. Revenue is a secondary metric. Why do I say this? In most B2B organizations, as much as I hate this, marketing does not control pricing, packaging, product, sales.
Yep.
All of those things have bigger effect on the conversion from the demand that you've created to closed won revenue than marketing does. Now, lots of B2B CMOs are going to come after me and say, no, we got product marketing and enablement and customer marketing. I'm like, if all of that stopped tomorrow, nothing about your pipeline to close one is going to change. For 90% of the businesses. And the reason I say that is not because those people aren't capable or those people aren't doing the best that they can. There are structural hindrances in front of them. And those structural hindrances don't get solved in the first 6 months or 9 months of the job. So just being very transparent that if you're going to keep your job, align on those 2 metrics, the search query volume and the hand raisers, and make those 2 numbers go up and to the right. Now, the question is, how do you make those 2 numbers go up and to the right? If anybody could tell you the formulaic answer to that question, we would all be sipping pina coladas at the beach. We wouldn't need to work. So don't listen to me, but here's what I can tell you. You need to have a roadmap of 10 experiments. 10 is the serious number. 10 experiments that you launch in the first 1 year of your job. And out of those 10 experiments, your 7 to 8 of them are going to fail, but the 1 or 2 that are going to succeed are going to give you the firepower for that type of growth, and then you rinse and repeat. And maybe you'll learn something out of those 7 or 8 that failed that give you some more additional ideas to start doing more experiments. Now, what are those experiments, right? And this all depends on like specifics of your business, right? What channels are you already in? What is your pricing like? How quickly does your buying cycle move, so on and so forth. But we keep going back to scientific advertising. You come up with hypotheses, you test those hypotheses, you monitor the results of that experiment, and you align on this with your CEO, CFO in the first month before you start. And then every month you're like, hey, these were the success criteria, these were the hypotheses and the experiments. You had a chance to inform what these hypotheses and experiments are going to be. Here's the current state. We've launched 3. 1 is looking good, 2 are not looking good. Here's the roadmap, rinse and repeat. You come up with that sort of hypothesis-driven scientific way of thinking about marketing, I'd be surprised if you don't get promoted by the end of the first year. Now, one last piece. Do not underestimate the importance of creative, the art, the storytelling. I'm not talking about that here, but if you don't have great skills for that in your internal team or through your agency, that is also not going to work. So invest in that early. Make sure that you shore up that part of the business in parallel to getting this measurement and experimentation stuff sorted.
There was a lot there. This was an amazing answer. And so have that conversation, get aligned with CEO and CFO that the two metrics that you're going to be driving is search queries, which includes Google, LLM, all of them. And then the second one is hand raisers, either for demos or for free trials. Not so much actual revenue pipeline. Are we assuming that they'll be reasonable and say, yeah, actually you have a point, you don't have an influence on pricing, packaging, sales, and product, therefore we're going to relinquish our, because a lot of CMOs are measured on qualified pipeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
the reason I say this is, well, if you think about it from first principles, your hand raisers and demos are your qualified pipeline.
Sure. Okay.
Right? So it is a leading indicator. Now I'll give you an example. You got a bunch of hand raisers, but something's broken in your outreach flow, and it takes 4 weeks for the initial meeting to get set up.
Right.
Are you going to hold marketing accountable for that? Why?
Fair enough. Yep.
It makes no sense. So you're reducing the noise in your measurement by focusing on hand raisers and people who are literally saying, hey, I want a demo, or I started a trial, or I want to book a meeting, whatever your buying process is, but that first entry point into your buying process. I will also say, this is where marketers will shoot themselves in the foot. If you can't align with your CEO and your CFO on who is your ideal customer, you also have a problem. Because maybe the CFO is like, our ideal customer is, mid-market CIOs with a team of at least 20 people under them. And you're getting a whole bunch of hand raisers from SMB CTOs who are doing all the IT themselves. That's a complete mismatch. So I'm not even talking about it because that's like, to me, so obvious that
Sure.
you need to solve all of that before we talk about this quantified way of thinking.
And then you said 10 experiments in your first year, which I guess comes down to 2 to 3 experiments per quarter. How do you pick which 2 or 3 to do in any given quarter?
There's so many prioritization frameworks for this, right? The product and engineering land, I think there's a framework called ICE, if I'm not wrong. Impact, effort, contribution, something of that nature, right? So you're basically just saying, what is the, maybe I got that wrong, but ChatGPT it, figure out.
You don't have one favorite prioritization method?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. And the reason is these are all, tools and frameworks that help, and every business and every leader has a different way of looking at things. It really just boils down to simply what is the thing that's going to get the most bang for my buck if it's successful.
Yeah.
So a lot of people get stuck on like optimization type of things, but if you're in a startup, which I think most of your audience is, a 5% gain here, a 2% gain here, a 10% gain there is not really meaningful. You need to go for 50% gains, 100% gains. Realistically, there's only 3 or 4 things like that ever for a startup. And so think about those big things that could change the trajectory of the company and your team and put them at the top of the list. And that's, those ideas, by the way, where do you get those ideas from? You get those ideas from observing your customers. And so I've talked a lot about this as well. You should be, doing a lot of research with your audience, prospects, customers, general community, And that research has to, when we're specifically talking about sort of advertising and promotions, out of the 4 Ps, that research would focus on their media consumption habits. It would focus on, essentially understanding where they spend time online and offline, and what is the type of content that resonates with them already. This might be literally, hey, open up your phone, show me what's on your home screen. It might be, hey, what was the last podcast that you just loved and shared with your friends? Hey, what is the last TV show that you watched? And what you're trying to do is trying to understand your audience and the types of sort of media that they consume, and that'll give you some ideas of like, if they talk about YouTube all the time, then hey, you should probably think about doing some YouTube advertising. Exactly. So that's how I would think about what floats to the top in terms of experiments and where you get those ideas for experiments.
I don't think a lot of people are good at framing a good experiment. How would you frame, if LinkedIn Thought Leadership was one of the bets that you wanted to make, how would you frame that experiment? What's the timeline? What are we going to measure? What's our hypothesis on what it's going to do? Give me some rough idea.
I'll give you an example that we are doing ourselves. So we've primarily done LinkedIn advertising up until now. We're going to start introducing Google search ads. And for the search ads, we're actually going to start with probably competitor ads. I'm not personally a big fan of this, but my team has said, let's give it a shot. I'm like, great, let's give it a shot. And what we decided is we're only going to geo-fence those ads, so geo-target those ads in the state of New York. And when we launch it, it is only going to be launched in New York. And so if there's any sort of queries for our competitors in New York, we will have our search ads displayed against that. And why are we doing it that way? We're trying to see if we can increase the traffic. You remember me talking about traffic from the state of New York by X% during the time that those competitor ads are on. And it's a very easy way for us to see, because we can see that traffic in California or some other state, Texas, we did not do any Google search advertising. That's the only thing that we're doing extra in New York. And so we have a comparable control, and we can see if Texas stayed like this, but New York went like this. The only thing that was different about New York in that time period was the fact that we had those Google search ads. That's a very simple way of DIY sort of geo-testing. And the way you would define the hypothesis for that is like, hey, Google search ads focused on competitors can bring an extra 20% traffic to our website. And that's it. That's the goal.
Now, you're a relatively small company. You don't have unlimited budget. How do you think about budget? Like, how much are you going to spend on those Google ads? And then for how long are you going to run it until you make the cut to say, okay, now let's compare?
We're probably going to give it 4 to 6 weeks. Google search moves pretty fast. So, if somebody's searching for a competitor, they're probably already high intent for the category. So we don't have to wait for too long to be able to see the effect. It's very different from like TV or, YouTube, where you're not searching for a, SaaS tool. You're just there getting entertained. And so it's a very different sort of way of thinking about those two types of channels. So when you have direct response, bottom of the funnel type of channels, you can move pretty fast. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, probably enough. The reason I say 4 weeks is we're doing it for the first time. So we probably have to, get familiar with just like all the mechanics of the search ads, the competitors. We have to test our way into what is the right CPM or CPC that we should be aiming for to make sure we get enough share in the auction. So this is where the dynamics of the ad channel matter. And you're not just going to perfectly launch the most optimized version of your search ads on day one.
Sure.
It's going to take a little while for you to get right. So it might be 4 weeks, it might be 8 weeks. It'll require a discussion for me and for my ad buyer to kind of just have that back and forth. And in terms of budgets, our budgets are tiny. So the budgets, there's a scientific way to get to the budget answer, because we know what is the cost per hand raiser for us that we're willing to pay. We've done enough math to know that we're willing to pay 2,000, 3,000 for a demo that is a qualified demo that's booked. And so you back up from that to, what is the appropriate amount of budget you need to invest in a Google search ad, because we understand how many demos we get in a given month. We know how many demos we get from New York. And so we can say that if we're trying to get another 20%, then this is the number, and therefore here's the budget that we should invest. And then you give it a little bit of a buffer because you're not going to be super optimized in the first go. So you're okay for the cost to be higher in the first experiment. And over time, you can bring the cost down, right? So all of that math is fairly straightforward. Where it becomes hard is in new channels. New channels are always going to look worse than existing channels because you've optimized the heck out of existing channels. So, you got to have a different standard for new channels, a little bit more relaxed in that experimentation phase. But you still want to get clear growth, right? So don't fluff the numbers. It's okay for it to be twice as more expensive than other channels, but you still need to see the incrementality and the growth through that channel. Because if you're not seeing the growth, then what are we doing?
I know we're getting nitty gritty, but I feel like it's useful. So let's say just so I understand, let's say that you're getting 10 hand raisers from the New York area per month. Your assumption is we're going to increase that by 20%. That's 2 additional. We are willing to pay 2 to 3K per hand raiser. So if we spend 4 to 6K in those 4 weeks and we get those 2, then we're super happy. But given that it's kind of new and we need to do some experimenting, we're even willing to pay 8,000 for 2 hand raisers. So let's give it 8,000 over those 4 weeks. If we get our 2 hand raisers, hypothesis validated, and we're going to spend more and optimize from there. Is that correct?
That is correct. In our specific case, I might say that hand raisers is not the right metric for this particular test for the first go around. And the reason might be that the volume is too small. So 10 and 12 are in the margin of error, where some months we are 10, some months we are 12, some months we are 8. So you might actually have to aim for 15 or 20 for you to, because there's natural variation in every geography. So you want to be obviously above that natural variation. And so you might need to aim higher. Or alternatively, you look at the search query volume from New York, or, referrals from Google. So just traffic from New York. And if you're getting 100 or 500 a month from New York, you're trying to get to 600 or 700. And even that is a perfectly fine way of thinking about, so the first part of that experiment, like as you're testing your way into it. So all of those things need to be looked at on a per customer basis. What is the metric, and therefore what is the lift that you're trying to go for? The math explanation that you just gave, absolutely the right way to think about it.
Where does the 20% come from? Why not 10%? Why 50? Why not 50%? Why is our hypothesis that we can drive 20% increase?
There's no obvious answer. It's more like that 20% was kind of a throwaway number. You want it to be big enough where it's very obvious that you got that lift. If you only aim for 1 or 2 or 3%, the numbers are so tiny, especially in B2B, that it's indistinguishable from noise. So you don't want to do really small numbers. You also don't want to do 100% growth, because that's asking for a lot from a completely net new channel. So you have to aim for somewhere in between, and that's where, a little bit of like, what is the natural growth rate of your business? How well do you understand this channel? How good is your first, execution going to be, is all going to come in. So my rule of thumb is at least 10 to 20%, if not more. Anything less than that feels like it's very noisy. And anything more than that feels maybe it's too ambitious for the first go around.
Yeah. And then your number of, we're willing to spend 2 to 3K per new hand raiser, is that based on your unit economics, where based on our average conversion rate and average ACV, this is profitable for us? Or is it based on, I know that on LinkedIn ads, I can get a hand raiser for 2.5K?
All based on unit economics. Yeah, so this is like an acceptable CAC after having seen the business for the last 3 years and what we need to be true to continue growing the business at scale.
So many
And
companies
obviously
your
that's a different
size.
answer. Say that again?
So many companies your size do not know that number. I know for sure because I ask heads of marketing and they do not know that number.
Isn't that problematic? Like, how can you do your job if you don't know that number, right? Like, and this is why I keep going back to like talk to your CEO, CFO in the first month and get really aligned on the key metrics and the success criteria. And, if you don't have that, everything else is like pointless.
Yeah. Now let's talk a little bit about your LinkedIn. I love your LinkedIn content. I actually spent probably 30 minutes binging on it today in preparation. What stood out to me, and I mean, this is really well meant. Your engagement is not crazy, right? Like 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 posts. Obviously, you have some posts that get 100 plus likes. It's not crazy, especially in your space, GTM. You're talking to heads of marketing, CMOs, right? There's people with massive audiences, thousands of likes on every post. But I mean, I learned a bunch of things. Like it actually stood out to me in a negative way of like what LinkedIn has become. Because I read these things and I was like, oh, I actually learned something. I took a note. I researched something. I like rethought a decision that I made based on something that you wrote. And I was like, that happens way too rarely on LinkedIn, where so much content is performative and it's all engineered and optimized and it all looks and sounds and smells the same. So this is a compliment to you, but also, what is your mindset when you maybe do see, I don't know, some people in the GTM tech who, go viral every second week? Well, you seem to have a much healthier mindset. And it shows to me in the content quality, but I'm curious what your mindset is around that.
Yeah. So first thing, if it wasn't working, we wouldn't be doing it. How do I know it's working? We have public companies coming inbound to us and booking a demo on our website. I have paid media heads in my DMs saying, hey, that last episode was fantastic. They've never liked my content. There are people DMing me and saying, hey, can we get on a call? We have to solve this exact problem, this week. These are, this last example is from a AI hyperscale, amazing, company. The guy never liked any of my content.
Yeah.
Zilch. So, A, it works. B, we don't need millions of impressions because we're not going after the mass market SMB audience. If we were playing that game, then I would play that game, but we're not playing that game. So you got to really understand the game that you are playing and play that particular game really, really well. And that means, we have to show up in a way that is going to resonate with these audiences who are talking about incrementality and MMM and care about that and are spending 20 million, 50 million, 100 million, $1 billion on marketing. They are not easily impressed by, here are the 10 prompts on ChatGPT type of, content. They're way above and beyond that. They're trying to figure out how to, improve their conversation with their CFO and with the board. Mm-hmm. And so when you understand your audience deeply and you focus on content that's going to deliver value to them, everything else kind of works itself out. Now, does that mean we're satisfied with the 50 or the 20 or the 100 likes? No, we still have to figure out how to break through and get mass distribution. And in my opinion, the way to do that, ads are great. Mm-hmm. So we actually get lots of engagement through ads because, hey, I don't know every CMO and VP of marketing personally in that mid-market. I have a really good sort of network within the Bay Area and B2B, but we need to go beyond that. And advertisements are great for that. The second is
thought leader ads?
Yeah, we just started. Yeah. That's the primary thing and thought leadership ads are working really well for us. The other ads are not working as well for us, not because they're not, because this is, again, back to like the nuances of ad buying. The way we had structured our account, our thought leadership ads and our non-thought leadership ads were competing against each other. And when you compete against each other, the LinkedIn algo loves thought leadership ads. So it would put all the budget behind thought leadership ads. So we know that TL ads work for us. So now we're going to try a different strategy where we have separate budgets for thought leadership versus non-thought leadership to try and find the winners in the non-thought leadership bucket and then promote them and so on and so forth. So anyway, back to the point. Just the raw engagement numbers are not the only measure of success. It's all of that qualitative stuff that happens. And we know for a fact that outside of Google and direct, LinkedIn is our biggest refer to our traffic, to our site. So that's another great reason to continue investing.
I know that we have 3 minutes left. At a very broad level, how do you currently do LinkedIn? Do you have someone helping you? Do you sit down once a week and you write everything? Do you post when you have an idea? Like, what have you found? Like, what mode has worked for you or is working for you?
The first 2 years of the business, I did it by myself. Just tried to learn everything I could about the platform. I was okay, not great. After we reached a point where we were doing, millions in ARR and we had a growing team and lots of customers, needed to get more scale. And so at that point, I brought in an agency.
Yep.
And so we've been working with them. So it's a combination of them interviewing me. It's a combination of me jotting down random ideas. And so we always have a backlog of content. And then together we are co-editing every piece. I come in with obviously the subject matter expertise. They come in with, the grammar, the editing, the journalistic style that is going to maximize the value of that content. And then sometimes they will write pieces from scratch, but I will go in and add my own flair. So it's very collaborative, but you got to put in the effort, and it's not easy.
Yeah, and I'm assuming it's based on a kind of interview, on a regular interview, or based on your podcast stuff. That's
a little bit of
happening.
all of this. Yeah. So the podcast, the newsletter, the blog, interviews, me just dropping in inspiration directly into our tooling. It's all of the above. So it's a fairly evolved program, I would say. There's a lot behind the scenes that happens.
Amazing. I have one last question, just because you mentioned, it's working because you got inbound from, for example, a publicly traded company. For the sake of experiment, how that's what's happening now after, you said you've been doing it for 2+ years and lots of iterations. What is a reasonable expectation for when an enterprise inbound happens from when you start posting, 2 or 3 times a week? Like, in your head, like, would you wait 2 months for that to happen? Would you wait 6 months for that to happen, to be like, okay, no, now I know for sure that this works. This is working.
If your content is good, it could happen on the first week. So the point here is there is, again, no formulaic answer here. If your content is good and it reaches the right people, it can happen fairly quickly. I mentioned that the first 2 years I was doing it by myself, and that meant I was taking lots of shots on goal, but my accuracy was not very good. I was kind of fumbling a little bit. I had some good instincts, but I was not a professional, at social media. And this is the first time I was doing it. So I had to learn through lots of mistakes, and that's, means that it's going to have a longer longer time period to having effect. Now, the ideas and the quality of the ideas and the quality of the editing and the writing has gotten much better, where the effect is like fairly, quick. So I would say if you're experienced, if you're senior, and if you have a very clear view of the market, you should expect results within the first quarter.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, Pranav, thank you for indulging me. I learned a bunch of things. I hope people learned a lot of things. If people want to check you out or check out Paramark, obviously all of that will be in the show notes, as well as a link to scientific advertising. I'm going to buy the book on Amazon now. So thank you very much for joining the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was a blast.
All right, this podcast is brought to you by Project 33. Project 33 is the leading executive thought leadership agency for LinkedIn. If you're looking to activate your founder, your CEO, your executives, or any of your internal subject matter experts and create thought leadership content for them to build trust and credibility for your brand, reach out at project33.io.